That was a very funny clip, but a very interesting one. And what makes it interesting is the subliminal message that they put inside that clip. Now, you saw the African man show up and be very dominant. He was very masculine. And this is apparent anywhere in the world. For example, when you bring all the people of the world to compete in physical races, many times people of African origin win in the most physically demanding activities. They appear to be genetically more suited to do certain activities like running, lifting weights, doing that kind of thing. And this is something that the rest of the world is forced to contend with, because for years and years and years they keep on insisting that they are genetically superior. But once we get to the Olympics, it is apparent that they are not. Now, this small clip, that video, was simply acknowledging the underlying biological reality about the different groups of people on the earth. Now, there's something about African masculinity that terrifies them intensely because of their history of, colonialism and war and invasion and, theft of resources from all these other groups of people. And so they are terrified that, Africa may unify and retaliate for all the things that they have done to us. And so in that clip, you saw as it was ending, the large African man smiled at the other smaller men. And what you'll notice is that they did not smile at him, but he smiled at them. Now, why would they put that? Why would they show that? Because when you notice many times in their movies, they will show African men who are very dominant, but who are not hostile. They are reinforcing the slave mentality. And in the slave mentality, the slave is never supposed to show resentment towards the master. The slave is never supposed to show anger or aggression or hatred towards the master. The slave is perpetually supposed to be smiling at the master. Despite the fact that the slave is physically more powerful than the master, the slave must reduce himself in size and power in any relationship towards the master. This is why they had that large African man smiling at them. And they are primarily our enemies. They never smile at us. They never show affection towards us or love or any kind of consideration. But we are supposed to show them love and affection at all times, in spite of and despite of everything they've ever done to us. So that's why they produce this sort of thing. And it's a shame that that African man was willing to participate in such a charade just to keep the slave master happy. But this is how African men behave. So in a way, they're capturing the current reality of Africa and of Kenya in particular. Because if you ever see a Kenyan cabinet minister, when they take pictures of them and they're in a large group, when you look inside that large group, there's always a foreigner. A Mzungu, a Mwindi, a Chinese, someone who's foreign. And that someone who's foreign is the one who's controlling them. They may have all the power, but this much smaller, apparently weaker person controls them. And that is the irony of the African independence, because it is African men who overthrow their own independence. For example, when the British Queen, who was the main colonizer in this century, when she died, there was an African man, I don't know whether he was a president, who went to give a speech. And in his speech, he was praising this colonizer to the point that even the Europeans were looking at each other. Everyone was looking at each other, being incredulous at the things that he was saying. He was absolutely praising her, saying that at 96, she died too young, that it would have been better if colonialism would have continued forever. And it was outrageous. But this is the way African men behave. And there's no reasoning with African men. They love, from what I've noticed, African men love being dominated, which is not a masculine trait, but a feminine trait. So despite the size and power, an African man can be controlled by any foreigner at any time. It's just the same way you see a small boy who is a herds boy, herding a very large group of cattle. And it's just a small boy who's like 6 or 7 years old. But despite his small size, he's able to control these huge beasts in their hundreds. And that is the nature of most African men that you'll encounter. They want to be dominated. They want to be controlled. They do not want to make any decision. They do not want to do anything. They want to be given instructions and orders, so that despite the apparent independence that we were given, it is African men who overthrow that independence by going back and behaving like slaves towards the former master. And this relationship appears to not end. Why would Nigeria take orders from England? Nigeria is a massive country with a huge population, but it makes no difference. Any Mzungu can show up and give them instructions. Why would Kenya take orders from, let's say, Switzerland? Why would they? Kenya has like 50 million people. Switzerland has how many people? Very few. But it makes no difference, because the males of the country want to be given instructions. They want to be dominated, which is a very feminine trait. And all that this short clip was showing was capturing a behavior in African men that despite their size and power, they will still act like women. It is women who keep on smiling in public, being non-aggressive, right? Why would such a huge man go around smiling despite his absolute dominance of the other men? Why? Why? If you have that kind of power, why would you go around smiling at men who are tinier than you? Why does that African man feel the need to smile at his absolute enemies? Why? Why does he feel the need to make them feel comfortable despite his dominance? Why? What's that all about? A real man doesn't care about that. A real man wants to conquer everyone and everything around him, but not the African man, because the African man is trying to be conquered despite his large size. So despite the size of Africa and the resources in Africa, African men can never gain global power. Not because the power is not there, but because they deeply desire to be controlled and dominated by men who are weaker and have less resources than them. And this is the tragedy of Africa.